So you probably remember not that far back that once upon a time, many Nintendo fans were expecting the official reveal for Nintendo Switch 2 to potentially take place in the month of March. Now this was stemmed from Nate the Hate, but it wasn't necessarily bad info, but rather this was something that was put out and communicated ahead of the internal delay of Nintendo Switch 2. Now you can believe any of these reports or not, but whenever it comes to major publications like Bloomberg, VGC, Eurogamer, Reuters, and many others, people that even have like a financial interest for investors in companies, and they all corroborate a story that suggests that Nintendo had an internal delay for their next gen hardware. Not to mention, we actually know this also happened with the original Nintendo Switch when it was planned to launch in holiday 2016 and it got pushed back to March of 2017. You can verify that via the Giga leak that happened. It is not by any stretch of the imagination outside of the realm of possibility that once there was a plan to launch a console in late 2024 holiday season, and maybe the reveal would have happened in March, but we are now at a point where that is not the current plan, and March 2024 has come and gone. April 2024 is about to be officially out the door, and at the time of filming, we of course have no kind of official confirmation or announcement from Nintendo that Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever it will end up being called, is coming anytime soon. There are slides that Nintendo has shared that clearly states they are working on next generation hardware, and their actual comments have been things to the effect of, we're always researching and developing new next generation hardware, but they haven't committed to anything in the way of what the project is or how close it is to us. And the reason that there is now a conversation taking place online that all eyes are starting to shift to May 7th, 2024 has to do with Nintendo's big investor briefing that is coming up. And I'd like to shout out a couple fellow content creators, friends of the channel that I actually talked to on Mr. Nintendo Prime's podcast, which I will be on May 1st, by the way, so come by and say hi as he launches his season 3 of Nintendo Prime podcast. I'm pumped for that. He made a video on this, so did Andre's Restart. Both of them I talked to on that podcast and keep up with here and there. And I saw a very interesting point raised from their videos, which is, once again, with a company like Nintendo, sometimes you have to look at their history and what they've done before to try to figure out where they're going from here. And interestingly enough, we were in this same situation back with the original Nintendo Switch in 2016. Granted, we knew of the codename NX, but there was also an interesting reason for Nintendo revealing that, because there was a lot of speculation and doom and gloom that Nintendo might be going the way of mobile games because of their partnership with DNA, and then also the colossal failure that was the Wii U when it comes to a sales perspective. People were legitimately afraid that Nintendo might be exiting the traditional console market and go the way of Sega, with primarily shifting to a software focused company and potentially even the direction of mobile games with that company partnership / acquisition of DNA. So there was a lot of reason for Nintendo to come out and calm down fans and say, hey, we're still going to be doing the next Nintendo console. It's codenamed NX, so you fans don't have anything to worry about. So they announced it a little bit earlier than they probably would have otherwise. But the big tweet that is being called into question actually went out on their investors briefing day in 2016, where it was the same investors briefing that we are expecting to happen on May 7th, where they are forecasting their fiscal year numbers for the upcoming fiscal year. Now you can see the tweet in question, which is from Nintendo of America, that reads, "The next generation of Nintendo is coming March 2017, #NX." And there was a big reason for them to correlate the timing of that announcement with their 2016 investors briefing, because that, again, was when Nintendo was forecasting their fiscal year numbers, which you might realize roll into March, the end of the next year, because that is when Nintendo's fiscal year is. So the numbers that they will be forecasting this time around at the May 7th investors briefing will indeed include March of 2025, which is the big month in question that we are all expecting Nintendo to potentially launch Switch 2. There's also some claims from Midori floating around online that I did notice from Nintendo Prime's video as well that I had missed too, where Midori replied to somebody talking about that March is a firm date for the hardware launch, kind of insinuating that some of the quotes going around online that March 2025 at the earliest isn't necessarily what they had heard in terms of their circle of developers that they keep up with, and that rather the expectation is from developers that now have your games ready to go in March 2025. Now, that doesn't mean clearly that there can't be changes between now and then, but this is lining up for all of the puzzle pieces to be in place for Nintendo to essentially need to communicate in some way, shape, or form with their investors around what their fiscal year plans are, and if the plan is to launch the console within that fiscal year that they are forecasting, it is going to be a very telltale sign on what they say here. Now, there is the slightest chance that they dance around all the questions, and that's whenever you can start to dig into the numbers. If we see them forecast very minimal revenue growth from software and hardware and forecast minimal units shipped and things for the Nintendo Switch, that's not looking good for the likelihood of them to launch the console within this fiscal year. But there is also some digging you could potentially do in the numbers to see if maybe some of what they are forecasting seems that much more optimistic and aggressive from what we're expecting to line up with the total units that they are telling us, at which point you could come to the conclusion that they are expecting something to happen but are not willing to say what it is. And that's where we would really have to dive through the Q&A and how Nintendo answers specific questions that logically the investors that are allowed to ask them those questions would have for them if those numbers don't quite line up with what they're forecasting versus the kind of revenue that they're expecting to bring in during next fiscal year. But the long and short of all of that is that there is a lot of hype and excitement now around the May 7th date from Nintendo when their investor briefing goes live, because this is going to be a big telltale moment. And even if you look at history, for the original Nintendo Switch, it was a significant event, and we're approaching that time once again where we're expecting to hear what Nintendo is planning with their next generation console. Not anything to do with the current family of lineup of Switch systems, but rather what is truly their next iteration and next generation hardware. And I am personally very hopeful that we at least see Nintendo tease the reveal of this console, maybe not even give us an exact timeline like saying what they did last time, that it will launch in March of 2025, but rather maybe they will communicate that we are working on new hardware, we are getting it lined up for the current fiscal year, and we will have more to share soon in the way of marketing and promotional material, so please stay tuned for that. Even if we just get some kind of official confirmation that it's around the corner from happening and not just that general generic answer of we're always researching and developing new console hardware, that will be a big win for me, especially in a year that is very unprecedented for Nintendo with software releases and what we have to play as Nintendo Switch fans. So that's really where I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you make of the May 7th date? And a lot of Nintendo's fans now shifting their sights to that as a big day for potentially some new information on Nintendo Switch 2. Do you think we see any kind of official acknowledgement of the console and some more information than what we have right now officially from Nintendo? Or do you think they once again pull that same old song and dance where they're dancing around the questions from the investors around new hardware and basically just tell us to kick rocks until they're ready to actually talk about it? But regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch the video on screen next if you haven't already. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.